All right, Albo, thanks for coming up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Very flattered to be here.
So, what do you do?
So I'm right now a doctor at UCLA.
Uh-huh.
So I got out about 4 years ago, completed my training. I went to
Medical school? No.
no, the training, the residency and the
Residency.
fellowship
I
after
see, I
medical
see, I
school.
see.
So
How many years does that take?
So
How many years of schooling did you go to?
Including college.
Yeah.
So I got
Not
into-
high school.
not high school, right? So the way I think about it is I got into college when I was 17.
Wow.
I finished when I was 33.
33. Wow.
So my entire 20s and then 3 years on either side.
So you said 33?
16, yeah, 16 years.
16 years
Yeah.
of schooling.
So, the college, the 4 years of medical school, the 6 years of training. And so after medical school, you need to do the training to become board certified.
Uh-huh.
So 40 years ago was when I became fully board certified.
Uh-huh.
And so then they released me into the world. I took a job at a community hospital for a year. But I always wanted to be in academics. I wanted to teach. So I did that.
teach. Interesting.
Yeah, so I did that for a year. And for various reasons, it wasn't a good fit. And the people who had trained me at UCLA, they reached out and they said, we might have a job for you. And I assumed it was your typical job, like the 8 to 5 kind of thing. But when I came in, they said, look, we're starting this new thing that hasn't existed in the UC system. We need board certified doctors, radiologists in-house 24/7. Because at nighttime, what typically happens at most university hospitals is that if you have residents who are still training, you have them take the nighttime call. They give you their best impression of what's going on with the MRIs and the CTs, and the ER docs, work with that. But what UCLA decided was that for various reasons, that's not ideal, right? So sometimes the residents are wrong because they haven't finished the training. And you don't know that until the morning when the head doctor comes in, reads the reports and says, hey, this needs to be corrected or that needs to be corrected. Nothing major has happened, but the university wanted to be proactive, and they decided that it's better to have a certified doctor who's already all done, finishing up the reports, communicating with the ED doctors, communicating with the surgeons. So when they brought me in, they said, what would you think about doing a hybrid position? So,
Teaching and
yeah. So
practicing.
I was brought in as an assistant professor.
I see.
I was hired by the medical school. I'm technically I'm just like faculty anywhere else. Like the people who reviewed my dossier were like 5 doctors and then a law professor at UCLA and an English professor. So the onboarding was the same as just any other faculty. But they said, we want you to do 1 week of nights where you're monitoring all the ED stuff, and then we'll give you some time to rest because you can't do that all the time. So then I have my time off, which allows me to come to Jiu-Jitsu and do that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then I have a week per month where I do the teaching. I get my residents and my fellows. I give lectures, and then I go back on nights again. So that's my cycle. I do the night work. I have some time off. I do daytime regular professor stuff, and then start all over again.
Wow. 16 years.
Yeah.
16 years. What made you want to become a doctor?
So, I think early on I was kind of anxious to figure out what my direction would be.
Uh-huh.
And I could tell pretty early on that I didn't really care about things, I couldn't imagine designing a product or selling a product. I love stuff. Like when a new iPhone comes out, I get really excited. I'm like, oh, now it has three cameras, or before it had one, right? But if I try to put myself in the mindset of if I was in the meeting where we had to decide that the thing had to have 3 cameras, I'd be like, whatever, one's fine. I could never get myself to really care about that, right? And I wanted a purposeful life, right? So and it wasn't things like I couldn't get myself to get excited about business. I couldn't get myself excited about products and that kind of stuff. I wasn't a salesman, but I early on I kind of had the sense that human suffering and that human struggle was something that appealed to me, that it was worthwhile to try to alleviate. So I tried to I started thinking of ways that I could work with people, right? And as a kid, I was way into science and all that kind of stuff. So then it started making sense, And I remember in high school, I was looking at the same statistics as you were, like 16 years. I'm not going to work for my entire 20s. I'm not going to make any money. I'm going to come out with like debt. And so I tried really hard to figure out something else that I could do. Counseling and all this other stuff. I'm like, I want to work with people, but
some calling kept pulling you towards that direction.
Yeah. And I just realized it was the right fit. The way I thought about things,
and your capability to be able to stick through it, right, for 16 years.
Right, exactly. It takes a certain bag of traits to do all that. And so as much as I tried in high school to figure out all these other things, it kind of like dawned on me that this was the right path. And then when I got to college, and it became even more apparent. I got to college and I really wanted to do research. That was something that you see on TV, that scientists put out papers and they contribute to science. So I really wanted to do that. And so as soon as I got there, I became a neuroscience major at UCLA. Oh,
okay.
And within that
neuroscience major,
right? So it was that thing. I was very very interested in how people think and how they feel. But of the ways we think, like psychology deals with why we think what we think, and maybe like sociology and economics, they think of it's more broader ways of thinking. I was just curious how we even think down to the cellular level. When you close your eyes and you think of your children's faces, they pop up. But really, we're doing that with cells and proteins. So it was just really baffling to me. And I wanted to get into the nitty gritty of that. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so I did neuroscience, and then that led me to working in research with epilepsy. And then once I got to that epilepsy lab, and I saw, we had the side where we were doing animal research, where we were seeing how animals were having seizures. But then there was a whole wing of the patient stuff. So once I started working with the patients, I knew it was this affinity that I had for science, this hardcore affinity down to the protein level. And then I was seeing people that were really suffering. They were going through this process at UCLA where they were being evaluated, treated, they were going through surgery, and they were coming out on the other side seizure free. It blew my mind that you could have that kind of an impact. And the lab that I worked at particularly worked with children. So the surgeon at that time, he would operate on kids as young as 1 year old.
And that's crazy.
Yeah,
something you don't have to even think. I can't even.
Yeah, I mean,
I had a good friend, a black belt friend of mine. He actually has a gym in Corpus Christi.
Right.
And he's epileptic, and he's been at one of the first time that's how we got closer, is he had a seizure before a tournament because he was so stressed.
Yeah.
And, foam coming out of his mouth and banging his head. And I didn't understand what was happening. And then my other black belt friend said, my mom has that. So he just lay him on the side and let him finish. And then he didn't remember who I was or where he was at. And,
right.
And I've become super close with him, and just to kind of see what he has to deal with. And then he starts telling me the stories, like most people die because they hit their head on something.
Yeah.
And like guys that have epilepsy so bad, he doesn't have it so bad. They have him on, is it lithium and different things? Yeah. But guys that are just like constantly like that, and they die from the falls, hitting their heads on something.
Yeah, it's some patients. When we would deal with the older ones, you just see scars, like as if they were fighters.
Yeah,
because they learn to adjust their life to a certain extent, to be careful and and whatnot, but you can't control it. I mean, that's the really heartbreaking thing about that disease, is that you think you have control over your body and your mind, and then this disease out of nowhere takes it over.
How does that happen?
Well, the way we think it happens is that
I would think, right? We don't.
Right. It's science. It's always building.
Yeah,
so the way we think it happens, whether it's the pediatric cases or whether it's an adult case, it starts with one area of damage in the brain. So for kids who are born with seizures, their brain maybe didn't develop correctly, so the cells didn't go exactly where they were supposed to, or circuits didn't develop correctly. In adults where there's trauma, they might have taken a hit, and a part of the brain might have scarred down. So in either case, what you have is a group of cells that are not connected to the rest of the brain appropriately, and they're not dead, but they're not functioning correctly. And for whatever reason, if they get excited in a certain way, what they're going to do is they're going to start recruiting brain areas on either side, and then it starts to spread. It's like, if
there's a glitch in the system.
Yeah, there's a glitch in the system. Sometimes fatigue causes that, not sleeping, stress, arguments. Depending on where the damage is, then the person will have different triggers. Somebody used a metaphor like if you're playing a piano and that's how your brain normally works, that certain cells are supposed to be firing at certain times to make music. The seizure is just all the keys being pressed down at all time. Right. And it could be this group of 5 that are jamming, and then they recruit the ones next to them, and then all of a sudden you have nothing coherent. You don't have music. The person is no longer functioning.
Right.
So that's why you would fall. There's no control over your legs. Your equilibrium is gone. You're not conscious. Brutal. And the really unfortunate thing is that the amount of time, the way the cells fire when they're having a seizure, causes damage. So if you have a little area that starts seizures and you have another seizure, right? Now that area has gotten bigger because the cells next to it that got recruited to fire that way are now damaged. And so the saying is that seizures beget seizures. So every seizure could potentially make the condition worse. So it's very important, if you can find that area that's damaged and cut it out, go to a neurosurgeon. It's very
actually going into the brain and cut it out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ideal situation. So for people who are dealing with epilepsy, if there is a surgical target, I mean,
how do they go in there? They have to open up the skull and
a neurosurgeon will go in and using the radiologist, the person who does the electrical work, the EEGs, and a surgeon, they all sit down and they try to find this target, right? My mentor right now at UCLA, she's one of the big people in the field. So she goes into those meetings and they ask her where it is, and she gives them the targets, and then the neurosurgeons will open up the skull and remove that area. For the kids, it's even crazier because some of the time, the malformation is literally half the brain. So they have to do like a hemispherectomy, which means half the brain is cut out. So the brain is of a newborn is the size of maybe a grapefruit. Yeah. So it's very difficult surgery, and then you take out half of it. So one hemisphere.
So how does it just regrows?
It doesn't regrow, but if you do it earlier,
the neuroplasticity, it makes the changes.
Right. So, one side of your brain controls the other, the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and vice versa. So if you take out the left side of the brain, parents are going to be concerned, well, is one side of the body going to be useless? And if you do it early enough, both motor maps will go on one side, both sensory maps will go on the other side. I mean, these kids are not going to play violin. It's the neuroplasticity has its limits. They're not going to have full control, but if you aren't paying attention, sometimes you're not even going to notice. It's
amazing. Yeah, we think, right? How those things happen? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Like I've seen pictures of like the cerebellum, like people being born without a cerebellum or just not having it. They have an MRI,
Yeah.
And they're totally functioning. They're totally walking around.
Yeah, I've had a case like that.
Really?
Yeah, I've called I called the referring physician and I said, "What happened to the cerebellum?" And I forget it's a he or she. They're like, what do you mean? He doesn't have one. And then the doctor,
accuracy, balance, and control, right?
yeah, somehow that person mapped enough of that stuff onto other portions of the brain and compensated. So to most people, nobody was able to tell, you know? Yeah, that guy was like 78.
Yeah.
He lived his entire life.
Yeah.
And nobody knew.
Yeah, he was fine.
Yeah.
How does jiu-jitsu fit into all this neuroscience and brain and
Well, it's
being a doctor and
it really has more to do with being a doctor. You know, that 16-year journey that I went through. Once I got out, I kind of just like looked around and I thought, you know, my entire 20s I dedicated to this thing.
yeah.
And I knew in my heart of hearts that I was a good doctor, but I hadn't done a lot of other stuff for myself. And so I felt very kind of unbalanced. And that 16-year period, it wasn't all just like kind of linear, you know. I would say the first half of it was pretty smooth because most of that was just going to school and taking tests, which weren't a problem for me. And then at some point between the second and third year of medical school, you know, I had this kind of like stellar career. And then I got dropped into third year of medical school. And that's kind of like the meat grinder of medicine, you know? So the third year of medical school was very rough for me and it's rough for everybody. So at that point, it was actually so bad that I didn't think that I belonged in medicine. I thought that I was pretty much, I thought I was like a phony. I didn't belong there. I couldn't cope with it. I didn't know how to, nothing I was doing was working. So from that kind of heartbreaking point in third year, I had to figure out how to be a doctor in a way that I could survive. And so, you know, the first 8 years was not that big a deal. And then the last 8 years, was just a very concerted effort to.
Or were the, I guess, insecurities or things that were like made you not believe that you're capable of doing it or being the doctor that you thought you could be?
The thing about, so I was at LA County, so I went to medical school at USC, and the county hospital is pretty much the closest to a war zone that you could get domestically, and that's how you feel when you're there. Even the government has decided that's what USC is. This was when I did third year was maybe 2008 or so. So the campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan were still pretty hot. And the government had to have places in the U.S. to train their surgeons, right? And or they would send the surgeons and then they would have to bring them back for leave. And they looked at all the hospitals in America and USC and a hospital in Virginia. They decided there was so much carnage and so much chaos that if you dropped off the surgeons there, essentially they were seeing the same things as they would see in the battlefield. So, you know, all those the county hospital is in East LA. So all those violent crimes, the car accidents, all that stuff goes into USC. And the county hospital is underfunded.
That's a lot of stress, huh?
Yeah, it's
not
unbelievable stress.
Yeah.
It's underfunded because a lot of the patients are undocumented, or they don't have insurance, so there's not a lot of money coming into the hospital. And so there's this onslaught of patients coming in all the time, and you don't always have the resources to deal with it. And the issues with being a doctor there's the system issues, and then there's cultural issues, and they're kind of separate, but they feed into each other. So the system issues is that every single night, some terrible car accident is coming in, or some shooting, some stabbing is coming in. So you're getting that human carnage constantly coming in at you. But on the other side, you may not have all the resources, staffing, tools, medicines. You know, it's those things are limited. And if you don't have the money, you make do with what you have. And then there's the cultural issues. So USC has always prided itself as being, even if you're not a military doctor, all the surgeons have this bravado and this attitude. And I'm not saying that as good or bad, because you need something to psychologically cope with all that.
You have to have a certain swagger mindset, right, to deal with all that.
Yeah, but it's rough. Like I came in thinking that I could handle it because I had been able to handle all these intellectual challenges, and emotionally I felt I really wanted to help people. I was there for the right reason. I was intellectually capable, and I would get into it, and I would see like doctors arguing at each other, and head doctors trying to get like residents fired, and
it's war zone on all fronts, huh?
Absolutely. The mind can only take so much
stress.
And it was just rough. Like everything that I did was wrong, and nothing worked. I either got ignored if I did something, or if I made a mistake. Then
how many years were you there?
So the third year is just third year of medical school, where that's
enough. Huh?
The fourth year also you do some of that stuff, but it's much less intense. The third year they really want.
What got you through that period?
I didn't. I don't think. I don't think I got out until.
No, but what got you through it? What did you think about that got you through that?
So I'll tell you. I'll tell you what I mean by not getting out of that. When I was in the trauma surgery rotation, which is 12 weeks long, and just a little backstory, the county hospital built a new building, so the old county is still there because it's basically indestructible. And so now we had a new facility. And so the first day that I started surgery was the first day that the hospital was opened.
Wow.
And it being a government kind of project, they hired architects that had never built a hospital before. So there was no rooms for medical students. So for the 12 weeks that I was on trauma surgery, there was no place for me to sleep, but I was there essentially day and night. So I was very, mentally and physically fatigued. I was getting yelled at all the time. Everybody was getting yelled at all the time. We would break into clinic offices and sleep on the desks.
Literally on the desks, huh?
Yeah, on the desks, because there was no beds.
It's either the floor desks.
Yeah, the floor desks. I remember this one time they realized we were breaking into the clinics, so they started locking them. Like security guards would go and lock them. And the only clinic that I could get into was the OB-GYN, the gynecologist's clinic. And so their tables are, they sit up, and then they there's nothing for legs, right? And so I was like trying to get up on the stirrups, like, and I was trying to hold my knees, and then I would like fall into REM sleep, and I would like almost fall off the thing. But so it was 12 weeks of that, and I was literally seeing people die every single day, and
man.
At the time, I thought I was tough enough because I was emulating what everybody else was doing. We would see somebody die, and what I really needed at that time, I think, was somebody to say, we tried our best, and unfortunately, we had this outcome. It's somebody's son, father. But for those people to survive, they couldn't do that for themselves, so they couldn't do it for me. So I started seeing people die without any emotional context, or dealing with the spiritual side of it and whatnot, which I didn't know that I needed there, but I really did. So
stayed with you.
Yeah, and I remember just I was having my doubts. I couldn't figure out why nothing was working, and one night we were in the OR. Somebody got shot 5 times in the abdomen, so we were in the guy's abdomen, and we were working on the 4 bullets, and the 5th one was on his aorta, and we decided, okay, well, we're not touching the aorta because if we take out the bullet, there might be a hole there, and he might bleed out. And then we got paged to the ED. Somebody got shot in the chest, so the military doctor grabbed me, and we went downstairs. So it's already a bad sign if the head doctor is grabbing a medical student who doesn't know anything. He must not have a lot of faith that this guy is going to survive. So we went down there. We see the bullet holes in the chest, and we do this thing called a clamshell procedure in the ED, not an operating room, where you basically cut left to right, nipple to nipple, and you open up the person like a clamshell, like a car trunk, you know. And I was there as support, so we looked in. The lung was collapsed, the heart was bleeding, and the doctor says, "You need to hold the heart while I sew." So I'm there with the flashlight in my left hand, and I'm making a C shape, and I'm kind of stabilizing the heart because, you know, it's slippery and it's moving. And he's like putting sutures in, and I'm like looking away because I'm afraid he's gonna like suture my finger into the into the heart. It's like, it's a very small space, you know. And he gets it done. The bleeding stops, and he says, "I need to go upstairs to check on the five bullet case." And I said, "What do you want me to do? What if the sutures burst?" And he says, "Grab it, maybe try to put your finger in it, and then have somebody page me to come down." And I'm thinking, this is insane, you know. That doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna be like the Dutch boy with the finger in the dam.
Yeah.
And so he says that, and I'm like, okay, I guess the size of the hole is pinky size, and I have my hand right there, and the heart's right there. And as he's leaving, I guess he had a sense. He turned back to see if I was doing all right, and the sutures burst, and it sprays my entire right arm, chest, and neck. And then before I could do anything, I could see that the heart was quivering, so the guy is dying, right? So the doctor comes back, and he says, "Change your scrubs, meet me back in the OR." And you can't wear, you know, jackets and stuff. The hospital is very cold. You can't wear jackets, so it's the scrubs, and the scrubs are basically like pajamas. They're very thin. And that sensation of hot blood on me, and then cooling in the air conditioning, it you know, it still kind of makes my skin crawl. And it was really upsetting, especially like the guy died. We were trying our best, and then he says, "Okay, see you in the OR." I think he did. He's like, "I'm calling it at 3:15 in the morning. Tell them that's how I recorded it." And that was all that this
wasn't
event.
a big deal. Like, it didn't matter.
Yeah, and it was a very big deal to me, you know. And so I had to go to the basement, change my scrubs. I had to wash. I had to look through the guy's chart to see if he had, you know, anything that was dangerous that I could catch. I got my new scrubs on. I went into the OR, and they were packing up, but the guy was still open, so he had died. So if you're packing up and everybody's giving up and the abdomen's still open, that bullet that was on the aorta moved, and that guy died. and I was like, this, you know, this is not what I need right now. And then that guy died, and everybody's like, okay, go to the ICU, check on the patients. We're gonna round pretty soon. And up to that point, I thought I was like handling it pretty well, but I couldn't. The sense of the hot blood on my skin and then turning cold, I couldn't get it out of my brain. It was just, it happened over and over again. Like, I could feel the blood, and it was like, you know, like little puddles, and I could feel every individual puddle on me and on my skin, on my neck, and then turning cold. And as soon as it would turn cold, my mind would replay it. And so that entire time, I'm just, you know, I'm extremely physically uncomfortable. And we went around. It was at this point, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. So the whole team is there. There's like 20 people. Most of them weren't overnight. There was the core 5 of us that were overnight taking care of all this stuff. And now the other doctors want to hear about what happened. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to feel this on my skin anymore. I was like, I wish if I could just sleep. I know I could maybe just forget about it. And the next thing I knew, I was on the ground in the hospital, the post-op area, by myself. So I knew that I hadn't fainted, because I knew what fainting was. Like, I had fallen asleep, but it didn't make any sense because I was standing up. I didn't know how I got to the ground by myself. But what was most strange was there was 20 people around me. How could this have happened and nobody, you know, said anything or not noticed? It's impossible, right? So I found my team, and there was 2 other medical students, and I pulled them aside, and I said, "What happened this morning?" And my buddies, he said, he's like, your back just hit against the wall, and you just slid down, and you fell asleep. And then I said, "Well, why didn't you wake me up?" And he said, well, yeah, I tried to. Like, I reached, and the other medical student, she reached at the same time to like touch my shoulder to see if I was okay. And the head doctor said, no, you leave him. And they left me because that was a sign of weakness. They wanted me to wake up, feel humiliated, be put in my place, you know. And I knew the doctor who did that, you know, and he was that kind of guy. And he had come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, driven in his like Porsche that he kept on talking about. He had a coffee in his hands. He took a shower that morning, and I was literally covered in blood the entire night. And I thought, like how dare you? You know, you wouldn't do that to anybody. Like, I was trying my best. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I fell apart at that time. And the response of being abandoned, it was so absurd to me. I was there with my team, and I was like, you know what? I haven't had breakfast in like 12 weeks. And I just left the team, and I went and had a coffee and a cranberry muffin. And I sat in the cafeteria, and I just thought, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but obviously I'm doing something wrong, right? And I felt like a huge phony at that time. I was like, did I trick everybody into, am I just like really good at tests and people think I'm personable, and like I must have tricked. And then I was like, did I trick myself into thinking I could do this? That was the worst part of it, you know?
Made you doubt yourself.
Yeah. So I decided at that time the way just to get through medical school was I'm gonna give 100% of my effort every single time, but I'm not gonna allow anybody to judge me for something that I can't give beyond that 100%. So if I gave 100% and I fell apart,
do your best, yeah.
And that's it. That's all you get. I'm not gonna allow somebody to make me feel bad because I wasn't a superhero or like I didn't
do your best,
I didn't allow myself to feel emotion for this guy who died.
Yeah.
So I was like, look, I'm gonna keep giving him a 100%.
You were treated just like that guy.
Yeah,
where they left you on the ground. The guy that died, and then just to add insult to injury, you're treated just like that guy. Like it didn't matter.
Funny that you
like
said
you didn't
that.
Matter.
Yeah, I told my wife that, and she got so furious. She's like,
man.
She's like, how did they know you didn't have a seizure, or you know, you might have been diabetic and you got hypoglycemic? Like they left you to die. And I don't know why I started defending the guy. I was like, no, he was just trying to humiliate me. He wasn't leaving me for dead. But really, that's what it is. You know, when you get into that mindset of that medical world, I don't know why I'm defending this. Do I have Stockholm syndrome or something? Why am I this guy? My wife.
That's crazy.
Like, no,
that's crazy.
They left you for dead. You know, that's what.
On top of the, you know, just fatigue and then PTSD and.
Oh, I definitely have PTSD, 100%, and I talk about that to my colleagues all the time, because nobody wants to feel weak, and they always people think, especially doctors who are very high achieving. They don't want to show weakness.
We read the book Emotional Intelligence.
I think I might have listened to it on audio.
Audible.
Yeah,
they have a whole part on the medical.
Yeah,
how it's like, you know, just they could be better. Some doctors could be better, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not the kind of person to hide. If I have a weakness, I'll tell you what the weakness is. I'll just put it out there. Because I don't think it benefits me to shield it, because in that weakness, I'm protecting the weakness. You know, I'm enabling that weakness to
you own it,
remain. I'll say, I'm not good at this. I don't do this well. You know, I put it on the table. And I realized the first time I ever told another doctor I had PTSD, his eyes lit up. He's like, I definitely have PTSD. I tried to tell my girlfriend, she's not in medicine, and she thought I was insane. She's like, soldiers only get PTSD. And so that like acquaintance that we had, we became very close friends, because he realized, you know, we could talk about this stuff together.
Which you need to, right?
Yeah, like for years, like even driving by county hospital would almost give me a panic attack. Like I'd have to pull over or just think of something else, and my heart would be racing, and I would go through all the sights and sounds and feel, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Feel the blood again on your skin.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us go through that kind of stuff, but we don't communicate. So it just allows this stuff to fester. So, you know, I very much don't believe, if I say that I have PTSD and I was depressed and I doubted myself, and you think that I'm a weaker doctor for that, then that's a problem with you.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, that's an issue. That's not, the issue is not that I had a really tough time. It's that you think that having a tough time is not allowed. It's out of bounds. So from third year up until like intern year, those 2 years I was, you know, I didn't think I belonged. I was trying to figure out how, I thought it was morally irresponsible of me to be a doctor, because they had shown me that I didn't deserve to be a doctor. So I had to really decide, is it even right for me to treat patients, right? And what I decided was, okay, you're intellectually capable, you emotionally want to help people. There's this thing that apparently you don't have that everybody got mad at you for, but we'll cover it up. And the way we'll cover it up is when you're an intern year, that's the first year of residency training. You always have a head doctor. She's like, you're not a real doctor. Just ask him all the questions. You do everything else. So make sure the prescriptions are filled, make sure the labs are done, make sure the CTs are done. Like, I treated myself as a secretary who also, you know, communicated with the doctors. And that's how I thought it might be okay for me to stay in medicine. If I pretended to be this guy that took care of everything else and just was attentive to the medicine side of things, that I could still be of value. And because I went into that mindset in intern year, you know, I was really like spiritually hurt at that time.
Yeah, for sure.
And I started seeing patients in a different way. Like, I would want to hang out with patients longer, and I think part of it was, or just stay in their room and just like chat them up. And I think I couldn't talk to doctors about it, but I had these patients, and it was like, you know, we're both in the hospital because something bad happened to us. Like, I failed at my life's aspiration, and you're sick, you know. So we're both kind of suffering here, and I wanted to, you know, it was like I was being pulled to just hang out with these people, and what I realized what was happening was, you know, I was hanging out in their rooms and they were telling me about their lives, and then they were like crying, and you know, I was just, it was none of the interactions that if I had aced third year I would have ever had, because I would have never stayed in a room that long. You know, I would have done my work, signed off my patients, you know, got the hell out of there. But now I was just in this weird between world, right? I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't a patient, I was just kind of there, and some of these people were like fascinating. Some of them were you know, I had admiration for them. I wanted to hear what they were about. And at some point during the year, I realized that me staying in the room with them was making their outcomes, their stays better, you know? Like, I had several patients with, this was in Oakland County, so I went from LA County to Oakland County. Same kind of.
Open County?
Oakland.
Oakland. Okay. So you moved up to the Bay Area? Yeah,
because my wife was at school there.
Ah, okay.
And
she also was at medical school?
Yeah. So she's also a doctor. And it was, I'm glad she was at San Francisco and I had to follow her, because if not, I would have stayed at county, and I don't know if I would have made it, right? Yeah. But Oakland County, on paper, it's the same thing. Very poor patients, nobody advocating for them. Same kind of gun violence, car accidents, all that kind of stuff. You would think they're very related. The only difference is that you know, if you swap out the Hispanic community and you just add African American community, that's pretty much it. Otherwise, on paper, they're the same. But what was different was the culture and the system there. So the system was still burdened, but the culture of the place was very supportive. So they closed ranks, and
so important.
Like, I've never seen doctors support each other that way, you know. And so the culture was amazing. I'd never seen it, you know. And then I started.
And it changed everything for.
Yeah, and then I realized, like, you know, so like one patient, for instance, she came into the ED, and she was saying, I have hip pain. So we did an X-ray, and she basically had she had a tumor in her hip. And so statistically, most likely she has a cancer that metastasized to her hip. So I told her, I was like, you can't walk because the cancer's taken so much of the bone, you might break your leg. So you need to stay in the hospital. You need to get off your legs. And you know, she fell apart in the ED. And then every day for 4 days, she fell apart. And so I would go in there and I would take care of all the work that we need to do in the morning, and then I would go there and I would sit next to her, and she would cry, and then she would say the same thing, essentially. I've never smoked, I've never drank, I go to church every Sunday. You know, it was just really heartbreaking for this woman who, she was such a good lady. She did everything right. And now this terrible thing was happening to her, right? And I just sat there and I wasn't doing anything medical, right? But I wasn't allowing her to do this on her own. So then I would do that first day, and then I would come back the second day, and she, almost word for word, she would say this. She's like, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I go to church, I'm a good person. And so, whatever, that's what she needs to say. You know, I'm gonna be there for her. And then by the 5th day, that's when we got her a wheelchair, we got her appointments, and all this kind of stuff. So she was ready to go, right? So what was keeping her in the hospital was that we couldn't allow her to walk. So it's just a simple thing with the wheelchair and getting the appointments. So we got that, and then we send her off. And you just never know with county patients because they don't have insurance, they don't have support systems a lot of times, they don't have money. Does she have a car to come back here? Is she gonna fall apart at home? You just never know.
You don't know.
And 3 months later, she had her oncology appointment. And then she came back to me in clinic, and she said, you know, like, hey, if I was like, I was completely falling apart. I didn't know what to do. Like, if you know, thank God you were there because I trusted you, and I just remembered the things that you told me, because I gave her a list of things. That, you know, come to this appointment, you need to do this, you need to do that. She's like, I trusted you so much. When I was like falling apart, I would remember you, and I would remember this list. And I was thinking, man, how many patients have I not had this experience with? That I gave them advice that they were not emotionally capable of processing, and then they went out, and then they didn't make it back to clinic, right? Or they didn't go to their chemo appointment or the dialysis appointment. And it started to dawn on me that me sitting there and listening to her cry was the most medically important thing that I did, because that's what got her through the time that she was at home to come back to clinic, to have some hope and some guidance. Because otherwise I could have just been like, hey, there's nothing medical I'm doing for you. Your wheelchair's not in yet. I'll see you tomorrow, right? I could have just done that. She had nothing.
Yeah, doctors have so much power.
Yeah,
to make a difference.
Right, and
because they believe in you.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trusting in you,
and they need that, because it's very hard for people to contextualize and understand. Like, how do you understand cancer? You know, it's very few people have the mindset to be able to cope with that on their own. I think it's probably impossible. And you need intellectual support. You need somebody to explain it to you, to understand what's going on. But you also need emotional support. You need community support. There's all these things that need to be done. And if you don't bother, sitting with people and listening to them cry or getting angry and cuss, sometimes people process things in different ways. If you don't allow them to do that, then you only have one bullet in your gun to help this patient. Talking about gun violence this entire time. That's not the metaphor I wanted to use. But you, one thing in your toolbox, right? But you have all these other things, right?
The PTSD came out.
Yeah, it's like why did I use that metaphor? I don't want to shoot anything, even cancer. No, shooting cancer is fine, I guess. But what I'm saying is that you limit yourself to one tool, and whereas you have all these other things, right? And a lot of times people, it was kind of weird way that I got into it. I was hurting and these people were hurting, so I just wanted to be around other people like me, right? And so I felt that I was, eventually what turned out happening was that it was a healing process for me too. Yeah. But then I realized that this is the only way you could really practice medicine. It's, just
Amen.
spend 45 minutes with a person and have them cry.
Yeah.
Instead of having the next 15 clinic visits be useless because they don't believe in you, they don't trust you.
Right.
What you say doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. You have to establish good foundations, and you have to give people what they need. And at that time, she didn't need cancer medication. She needed to know that somebody who knew what was going on, cared about her, and was going to explain it to her.
And believe too, right?
Yeah, people need different things. All sorts of different things.
Yeah.
If you think that people just need medicine, like physical medicine, like the pills or something like that, then there's a possibility that they're not going to take the pills.
Lance Armstrong book, one of Lance Armstrong's biographies, and he went to all these when he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. He went to all the different doctors, and the top doctors, right? They weren't sure. They kind of he felt like they didn't believe really that they could heal him. And then he went to some, not top guy, or top guys, but he believed. He's like, we can win.
Yeah.
And he stayed with that guy.
Yeah, because
and the rest is history. That
makes sense. Because Lance is a competitive guy. You can't.
He felt it though. He felt it.
Yeah,
he knew how important those components are.
Yeah.
Of belief and having the right people around you.
Yeah. And it's when I go,
it's not so simple, right? It's not just
it's not at all like
book that. And words. Like you said, we think, right? We don't know how these things work, but those things for sure.
Yeah, like I at that point in my internship, when I started realizing that that's what I wanted to do, and it kind of made sense of how to practice medicine. If one of my colleagues, my other interns, they would say, oh, this person's family's here, they're pissed off, I don't want to have this family meeting, I'd say, I'll have the family meeting.
Yeah, for sure.
No big deal.
Yeah.
And so I would go in and I would start to assess, what does this family need? Like one example, I went into a room and there was this frail old guy, the patient, he was laying down, he was kind of looking away. And he had, I think, 3 sons and 2 daughters. And I walked in, and none of them were sitting down, which is a bad sign. It's a lot of tension, right? And all the guys kind of had their chests out like this, and all the women were did this kind of corner turn. They were looking away, and so I knew that these guys there's aggression there. And for the women, the way women, at least the way I've been observing, is if they really don't like you, it's not aggression, because a woman can't be aggressive to a guy. It's disgust and rejection, right? So she's turning away. And so the daughters are doing this to me, and the sons are like, this better be good, right? So I realized they are not happy with the way we're treating their dad, right? Whatever I suggest, whatever way I suggest to treat their dad, they're not going to accept it until they believe in me, right? They believe that I have his best interests in heart. So I could understand when my colleague was like, I don't want to go in there. There's like 3 big dudes. The daughters are, not happy. But so I started breaking it down. The first thing you do in that situation is you go to the dad, because this entire time their dad has been ignored. That's why they're pissed off, right? So I'm not going to address them, even though they're giving me all this energy. I'm going to go to the dad. I'm going to introduce myself. If possible, I'm going to get down to eye contact, shake his hand, ask him how he's doing. And then I'm going to ask for permission to introduce myself to his children, right? Because this is not a frail old man. This is the patriarch of the family. To those big dudes, this guy was Superman at some point, right? So, you rearrange the situation. You're like, no, this is not a frail old guy.
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, this guy, he's your patriarch. He's a superhero to you guys. He's at the very least, I respect him to that level. I'm gonna ask him permission, and the guy's like, yeah. Like, he was turning away from his children because probably all that intensity was kind of upsetting him too. And he's like, yeah, sure. And then he kind of like turned, and then I introduced myself to his family members. And there was this thing that I would do with these kinds of situations. Like I had this one stool that I would kind of take from like ward to ward. You just drag it along. It's one of those stools that you turn, it goes higher. You turn, it goes lower. So I would I wouldn't use the chairs in the rooms. I would take that stool, and then I would turn it so that my eye contact would be to the patient's level or even slightly lower. This is, with the situation, I kind of made it a little lower. I sat down so that the patient was looking down at me instead of me telling this dude what's gonna happen, right? Which I think is very kind of disrespectful. If you're treating a patient, you should always be eye to eye.
That's a lot of thought, That's
exactly.
compassion.
That all happened because I thought I was a terrible doctor. I need to figure out other things to do, So I really started paying attention to what people need, and I realized the figuring out what pill to give people. That's maybe 5% of the mental work that a doctor does. The other 95% of it is negotiating patient emotions, family emotions, insurance companies. There's all this other stuff that's the human element of it, and it doesn't seem like it's directly linked into medicine, but it's at least as important, right? Sure. So I would put my stool down, sit down, and have this respectful stance. This room is connected to a hospital, but this is your room. I'm coming in as a guest into your house. Dad is dad. I'm going to see how I could help. And all sorts of things like that. And before I even say anything medical, and another thing I would do is I would make sure all the lines and stuff are good, because I realized this too, that people get very emotional about, they don't know where to put their emotions, right? Like if you do a procedure that they don't see, it's hard for them to get emotional about it. But for instance, putting IV lines in old people, children get very emotional about that. Because a lot of older people, they take Advil and that sort of thing, so their skin bleeds. So you put an IV and it blotches, right? But it's not dangerous. For kids, it's a big deal. You just made them bleed, right? So got down to eye level.
To be sensitive.
He had two IVs. He had one in the back of his hand and one here. And I took his palm, and I was like, "Oh, you got a little bit of bleeding." It was the first time somebody's acknowledging it. Don't worry, this is safe. I'm sorry it happened. It's because you have Advil, right? So I'm acknowledging that, but I'm also we're having some physical contact here. Like I'm not.
You're so considerate and all these things. And I was venting I don't know when it was a few months ago or last year on like doctors and those things, and
it's
because that's how there's not enough time, and like people just getting pushed through the door. There's not enough like emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's probably going to get worse. I think
just because it's like a business, right?
It's becoming more of a business. Yeah. I mean, even in my own
big
department,
companies buying the
venture capitalists, companies buying hospitals. Yeah, my chairman even he came up to me and he said, "We're changing the names of the section heads to middle managers, and if you want to be a manager, if you want to go to UCLA MBA, you want to get an MBA, we'll send you there for free. You could be a junior middle manager, then we could move you to middle manager." And I was like, "Stop calling me manager, man." I was like, I spent my entire life not being a manager. Call my section head the section head. You're the chairman. Could we just stick with the doctor titles?
So you dedicated.
But he can't, he can't institute business-like regimens on us until he turns us into businessmen.
Right.
And, think of the MBA was kind of like, oh, they'll pay for me. That's cool. It's interesting. It's something that I always kind of thought would be interesting. I was like, no, thank you. Because once I get that, then they're definitely going to make me a manager. And then I'm going to start working
Let's go back to Jiu-Jitsu, because I think we're kind of running out of time a little bit.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so how has Jiu-Jitsu helped you? What has it done for you?
So...
Because, we're going through, you're in the war zone and PTSD. And
yeah, once I got a hold on the kind of doctor that I wanted to be, then I just kind of refined it. And then, several years later, I was done and I got all my board certifications and all that kind of stuff. And I was really happy with this guy that I created, that I like nothing frazzled him, nothing stressed him out, because if there's a room full of a lot of angry patients, no big deal. You're just going to go in and deal with it. But that was my professional side, right? And on my personal side, I was like, man, I'm not nearly as put together and cool. I was like, you know, like I dress like I'm still 15. It's all basketball shorts and t-shirts. Like I eat breakfast cereal for dinner. Like that guy and this guy shouldn't even like hang out. And I realized because the reason is being a doctor was so important to me that I carefully crafted myself into whatever I needed to be for patients. That everything was so intentional that I created this guy, but he was really for other people. He wasn't for me. You know, the reason I was able to go in that room and have 5 people mad dog me and me be okay with it was because I left my ego outside. If they needed to yell at me, then that's fine. That's what needs to be done at that time. They could go ahead and yell at me, and I'll let them cool down, and then I'll start talking to them. But you know, me.
Yeah.
If anybody yells at me,
so they're going back to the jiu-jitsu. Like, what did it do?
I wanted to finally do something for myself.
For yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to finally build something for myself. You know, like this thing that I did for 16 years. I wanted to take something difficult and throw myself into it and have something that was just for me. You know,
what attracted you to jiu-jitsu?
Well, I did a little bit of judo as a kid.
Okay.
And it was like at the right time for me. You know,
You grew up here in the U.S.?
in the U.S. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I did a little bit of judo then, and we came from a poor family, and my parents were really stressed about sending me to this place. But there was a little bit of peer pressure because the neighbor's kid went, so the neighbors kind of peer pressured my parents. And then after a while, my parents were like, "We can't afford this anymore," and it was really heartbreaking for me because, you know, I was a small kid. I was really shy. We were like the only Armenian family in East LA at the time. So I had a weird name. It was just, I was like getting picked on and bullied, and I had like no control over my environment or myself. And then I got to judo, and I was like, oh, I could, the world can be controlled. If I do this movement over and over again, then I could control myself. I could control other people. And my state of mind, my calm from a kid, it was just went from very frazzled to, okay, I might not be able to handle every situation, but I could work on it, right? It's very important to give kids the sense that everything is not chaos. But it also broke my heart that I couldn't afford to do it, right?
So you got a second chance, and
so when I finished everything, and I was like, I could do anything in the world, right? And I remembered that sensation that I had as a kid. I was like, I'm doing that. It's I gave this middle 16 years of my life to it. I'm gonna go back to before that when I was a kid, and I'm gonna recapture that. You know, I heard somewhere where when you're a kid, you fall in love with like 3 or 4 things, and then you lose them, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to recapture those things.
Interesting.
And
how old were you at the time when you did judo?
I was about 8 or so.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to pick it up later when I was in college. Not judo because we didn't have it there, but UCLA had martial arts classes. So I would cycle through martial arts.
But it wasn't like a grappling kind of a thing, jiu-jitsu,
No.
judo?
Well, I was a poor college student too, so the money came into it as well. So they had jiu-jitsu classes, but the gis were $150.
Oh, I see.
And I didn't have $150. So everything that I did had to be done in basketball shorts. So I did Muay Thai a while. I did Kali. I did Jeet Kune Do. They had a sumo class. And the kind of weird
Sumo.
Yes, the kind of weird kid I was like, I'm 140 pounds. I'm definitely doing sumo, right? So you know, they would give you the G strings, and we'd have like the circle, and but I couldn't do it in college either because you know I couldn't do it consistently. So
Excuse me.
I was like, I couldn't do it as a kid because you know, we didn't have the money. And then in college, I stopped doing it because I needed to study. So I took it away from myself. So then that really bugged me. So it was this undercurrent that I always wanted to come back to.
Why should somebody do jiu-jitsu?
You know, I think it's important for people to do things just for themselves and make themselves, if that makes sense. You know, like this whole career arc that I had, it was genuinely for other people, right? And it didn't feel like I was doing things for myself. And for the first time, you know, in a while, like all the things that I'm doing here is, you know, I'm not going to jiu-jitsu to necessarily be a better husband or a better father or anything like that. When you know, I'm I'm in side control and I don't tap and I don't give up, I don't give up because that's the kind of person I want to be. I did that for myself and nobody else, you know? If
connecting those circuits, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
In the brain.
Yeah, there needs to be
Being
balance.
the way you want to be,
Yeah, you have to
toughness and
you have to build yourself, and the things that I wanted to be just for myself and nobody else were in jiu-jitsu, you know, the patience and the toughness and not giving up. And then also I think it's beautiful, you know. There's a beauty aspect of it where you see a higher belt like pull off a slick move. Then for yourself, you're like, I want to also do.
Have you experienced the cowboy mount?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Not tapping out to the cowboy mount.
Yeah, that's. I guess it's a prize. That's for me and nobody else. And you know, people ask me, my friends, my wife, she's like, "Why are you doing this?" Especially when I come home and I look like
you're smiling, you're laughing.
Yeah, I look like a ripe banana because I have all these bruises. I'm like, I have
it's living.
Yeah, I was like,
good for you.
Because I just proved to myself that I'm tough. I could take on challenges, and you know,
it's good for you. It's fun. It's good for your soul. Good for your.
It absolutely is, and you know, I hope people realize that it's you can't go through life making versions of yourself for everybody without making a version of yourself. You know, because people are parents, and once their parents get older,
you have one boy.
I have a 7-year-old. Yeah. One boy.
No, just one.
Just one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're your father, and then your parents start getting older, so you start being that person for your parents, and then you're somebody to your community. You're somebody to.
For sure.
But at some point, you gotta be somebody for yourself and look out for yourself. And I think that's why people sometimes don't exercise, because it's not even on the list of priorities. You know, it's not even that's on the priority list. It's not even a consideration because.
You probably take care of yourself so you can take care of better others and
right. It's all interconnected.
Yeah,
if you're like 5 main people, you know, 5 versions of yourself that you could get, whatever, or 4 versions of yourself, they're all interconnected, right? Like, I wish I was as smooth as I am as a doctor in my real life. I'm not, but sometimes I'm like, what would I do if you know it was that? It kind of informs each other, right?
What advice would you give to a younger Avo, a 20-year-old Avo?
I would probably have told him that, you know, this is now in retrospect, knowing I would have told him, keep doing the sumo and the Muay Thai and doing that stuff, and just carve out some time to protect for yourself. Because when, see, the reason I got, it was so disorienting as a third year, even though my intentions were so good, was because everything I was for this one thing, and then I couldn't do it. So you need to have parts of yourself that are protected and are separate. So if this thing goes wrong, you could go back to your island and just, you know, I'm safe here. I know I'm all right. I could build a boat, or I could start swimming back out and try this again, but I'm safe here.
Your sense of self.
Yeah. So it's not that you're giving up studying so that you could do this thing. It's absolutely necessary. You're making yourself a better person by having this protected portion of yourself that you think is important. And once you agree that it's important, then you can convince other people that you're important and that you shouldn't be left on the ground. You know, if that version of me woke up, it was so heartbreaking at the time, but if that version of me woke up and said, those guys are a-holes, I'm a valuable person. Yeah. You know, it could have been handled better.
Armenian, you know, like.
I was not happy. Let's just say that. Yeah. Like, you can't treat anybody like that, but it's really amazing how we treat medical students and residents and nurses. You know, to be honest, like, just across the board, a lot of people who go into it are doing it for the right reason, and we just punish them for it instead of rewarding them or encouraging them. And that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to come back and teach. Now I have residents and I have fellows, and I try to be for them the version that the leader that they needed, that I needed, right? And I could tell sometimes I'm encouraging, and a resident will be disoriented because I'm encouraging them when they made a mistake, and I want them to know it's fine. You're supposed to make mistakes because you're not a full doctor yet. I'm the full doctor. I'm supposed to know the stuff. You're not. And I could tell some people just like retreat. I'm trying to encourage them, and they think like, why is he being nice to me, right? And that's because this person probably came from
Right.
a terrible third year and training and this kind of stuff, and they got to this point by being kind of kicked around. And so now that I'm showing genuine care and consideration, they don't know how to deal with it.
Humanity, huh?
Yeah. And so every chance I get with a resident, I try to recalibrate them and tell them, before we do a shift, after we do a shift, if they get something right, I make sure to tell them that they got it right. You almost never get that in medicine. You either do what you're supposed to do, or you get reprimanded. So I make sure everybody, like, if they make a good call, they do something right, that deserves a phone call or that deserves a conversation as well. And so hopefully that's helping.
For sure. How can people find you?
So I'm the only social media I have is Instagram. Doc_Avo. And the only reason I got it is because I wanted to follow all the the amazing people in this gym. So you could reach me there.
Yeah.
Or the mats. Otherwise, it'll be at my workplace, and buckle up. Don't drink and drive. Don't text and all that kind of stuff. So only meet me on the mats, basically.
Thank you for all the work you do and are doing, and I really appreciate just you training and your personality and how caring you are for everybody.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
I'm glad that it comes through. Thank you.